Hello YouTube, I'm Edward of Team 2CEDZ. Sorry for the delay in this, but I've been going through some stuff lately. But without further ado, here is part 2 of the top 10 things wrong with the ElderScrolls Skyrim. At number 5, we got the lack of population in Skyrim. Now, video games are known for beefing up populations by having non-named NPCs just walking around doing random tasks. But in Skyrim, there really isn't that much of that. And that leaves many of the major cities feeling very underpopulated. I mean, Solitude, the capital of Skyrim, has on average about 12 NPCs walking the streets, and that does not make a city. That's like a small two-building village out in the middle of nowhere. And I think that's a severe problem, especially because this game has such an epic feel everywhere else, but the lack of people in it just kind of makes it feel empty. And that can just really ruin the game experience, because killing that dragon that's attacking the village, it feels a lot less important when you're trying to save 6 people. At number 4, we have the lack of magical viability in combat. Now, magic has always been a big part of video games. From the early days to now, magic has always been that exciting, unpredictable combat style. Not as hack and slash as sword fighting, or as mathematical and aim-related as archery. It's always been that spontaneous, randomized combat style that gives you a lot of fun. But in Skyrim, because of the high magicka requirements for spells and the most magicka you're ever getting, unless you're using cheats or something, being something like 500 by level 50, it means that you can't really use magic exclusively. I remember the first time I played Skyrim and decided to go full mage. I entered this dungeon full of Draugr, Deathlords, and I was soundly defeated when I could only cast 5 fireballs before having to retreat to replenish my magicka, and that kind of just ruined magic in general. I ended up having to pull out my sword and heavy armor just to get through the dungeon, and yeah, I mean, magical combat is something we should be able to, like, just utterly destroy opponents, but in Skyrim, it's little more than a parlor trick that you use to get that first hit. At number 3, we have the lack of NPC respect or acknowledgement. Now, video games have always been good at making us feel good when we reach an accomplishment, like 100 heavy armor or 100 archery. But in Skyrim, it's kind of like, oh, you're level 100, you have 100 heavy armor, 100 two-hand, you're the most legendary warrior out there. You can join us, I guess. And that's really detrimental to somebody's self-esteem. I mean, if somebody spends 40 hours in a video game becoming the best they possibly could, there should be a little bit more payoff, such as the companions begging you to join them, or the archmage saying, I am humbled to have such a legendary mage come into my college. But in Skyrim, it's almost the exact opposite of that. No matter how skilled you are, it's like, I guess you're okay. And that's kind of a slap in the face to us gamers. People who spend hours upon hours doing legendary things just to not get any recognition is just horrifying. Especially to people who have spent 100 hours on a video game. We aren't getting that time back. And we should feel like we've been rewarded for doing these long treks to the wilderness to find some sort of legendary treasure that will cause everybody in the village of White One to celebrate and cheer. At number 2, we have something that really touches me deep down. Dragons. Now, dragons have always been the ultimate boss in terms of video games. They're the creatures that could kill us in a heartbeat with their flaming breath. And with the ElderScrolls Skyrim that was banking itself on the return of the dragons, in the end it kind of comes meh. I mean, yeah, on your first playthrough, during your first ever time playing Skyrim, dragons are going to be quite terrifying the first time you meet them. You're going to see them, you're going to see it come from the mountains, and you're going to be panicking quite heavily. You're going to be screaming, you're probably going to be terrified of, how do I defeat this thing? That wears off pretty quickly. By the time you fight your 5th dragon, you're going to know the techniques and patterns pretty well. By your 10th, you're going to have the gear to easily rip that thing out of the sky. By your 20th, it's going to become a nuisance just to deal with them. And by number 50, you may just ignore them altogether and let the guards take care of them. And that just cheapens the entire experience. Dragons are supposed to be the creatures that give us the ultimate challenge, not something that we simply memorize their attack patterns and take them out as quickly as possible. And by God, the second you get the dragon wrench out, they become not even worth fighting. Finally, at number 1, we have one of the biggest issues in the game, the Civil War. Now, I'm not opposed to a factional civil war over the kingship rights to Skyrim. In fact, it sounds like a pretty cool thing. But the way they execute it leaves a lot to be desired. First off, war is just not storming castles and taking them. It's diplomacy, it's espionage, and while we get a little bit of that in one mission per side, that alone is not a war. Now, I think there should have been 2 main changes to the way things are done. First off, I think we needed a bit more diplomacy. The ability to convince certain Jarls and NPCs to join us on our cause. I mean, there's several quests that clearly show that Jarl Balgriff of Whiterun still worships Talos and hates the Thalmor with a bloody passion. So why not be able to capitalize on it and say, hey, Balgriff, why don't you join us? We know you're still, like us. And the next thing we should have changed is we should have added 2 more factions. One pro-Thalmor and one anti-Thalmor. Now, the anti-Thalmor can be simply some guy who comes up and says, hey, Talius, Ulfric, you guys need to work together to fight these darn elves. Because at the end of the Civil War, regardless of what side you join, they both kind of give the hint that, yeah, war with Thalmor, it's coming. So why not have the ability to join these 2 men and create some sort of ultimate military to fight them? And finally, we should have had a pro-Thalmor side that allows us to do things such as assassinate important people for the Stormcloaks or the Imperials so we can keep the war going. Because that's what the elves want. They want to keep the war going so that both sides are weakened. Thank you for watching this YouTube video. I'm Edward Parsons, and tune in next week for another Top 10 Things Wrong With